oh my gosh, there's a head. And I was like, yeah, no, she's coming. I have that experience that some women on this show have had where I was like, stop touching me, don't touch me. And they're like, no one's touching you. Like that is your baby moving. Oh, okay, never mind. I have that one more spasm and she came flying out, and my husband, was trying to figure out, I helped him pass her to me, got her on my chest, and she was here.
I had my children on the floor. I was on my favorite blanket that my grandmother gave me, on the floor like a cat.
And I realized in that moment the potential of what our bodies can really do as women.
Like, I could feel his head, I could do my own internal, like, yeah, his head, I could feel it.
I was in tears. I was just in tears and overwhelmed with gratitude.
Hi and welcome to the Natural Birth Podcast, the podcast that is bringing embodied birth wisdom from women from all over the world sharing their natural birth stories. Don't forget to subscribe and download so that you can always have access to these empowering and positive natural birth stories. Hi, Casey, and welcome to the Natural Birth Podcast. How are you?
I'm good. Hi, Anna. Thanks for having me.
Brilliant to have you. So today we're going to dive on into your two birth stories. One in the hospital that did see some medicalization, but that was a really positive experience for you. And then your home birth, which also was a beautiful experience. And we're also going to discuss a bit about birthing the placenta, bleeding, and how midwives might or might not manage that today. So we're going to dive a bit more into that bit because we've seen a pattern, or I've seen a pattern with women coming to the podcast and having had maybe a natural birth of the baby, but then being kind of meddled with in the third stage of labor, which is the birth of the placenta, either by given medication or just meddled with. And so I think this is a really, really great opportunity because you had that experience and we're going to talk about that today. So let's dive on into getting pregnant. Did you know that, you wanted to have a natural birth? Was that always like, yes, I knew that? Or did you discover that through research for your first birth?
No, I absolutely did not think that I would do a natural birth, and definitely never thought I would get to the point that I would be doing a home birth. I am a NICU nurse, so in my experience, I kind of see the worst of the things that can happen.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to just say right from the beginning that I used to be extremely judgmental of the idea of home birth. And when people would share that with me, I was a person who would verbalize that. So I think obviously we'll get to it later on, but one of my things is protect yourself when you're getting ready for labor, and don't share with people who are going to be like I was and be judgmental. So no, I never thought that I would be where I am now. I got pregnant with my son probably on our honeymoon or right after our honeymoon. I was never on birth control. He was not consciously conceived. He just decided that he was coming. And when I was probably all growing up thinking about having children, I was like, as soon as I find out I'm pregnant, I'm going to get an epidural, because like, why on earth would I go through that pain or discomfort if I don't have to? And a coworker told me about another podcast. I hope it's okay to say, the Mommy Labor Nurse. She is a labor and delivery nurse, and she also delivered 2 children vaginally without an epidural. So she kind of has seen both sides of things. And as I started to listen to it and learn about the cascade of interventions, I started to really want to lean more towards natural, or as natural as I could manage. Not necessarily for me, but for my baby's sake. I wanted to try to do the least amount of things that were going to impact him. And it did sound like the recovery without an epidural tends to be better. So that was kind of what led us. And I brought my husband into that. We did the birth course that she offers. And I like her birth courses because, and I think that yours do the same thing, but they teach about everything, because I think it's important to know about all the different types of delivery, and just be educated, but still go in knowing what you want and doing whatever you can to prepare for that. So anyway, we listened to that together. We kind of prepared for that. Yeah, so that's how I decided initially on a hospital birth, where I felt like it was the safe, because that was still at the time that I hadn't done a lot of research on home birth, and so in my mind, like, that was the safe place to be. That was where I worked, and I did deliver at the hospital I worked at, and yeah, so I was like, that's where it's safe. That's where we're gonna go, and I'm just gonna go there and try not to have an epidural. And I don't think I thought about really any of the other medicalization in it. It was just like, I'm just not gonna have an epidural, and that'll be like, and I'll just have a natural vaginal delivery with, and that's what my goal will be.
Yeah, yeah, beautiful. Yeah, so for you, the most important thing was to avoid epidural because of the potential effects for the baby and to optimize your chances of having a vaginal birth. That was the most important for you going in. And as I understand it, you had that, but you also had interventions that maybe you didn't think about beforehand happening. But also, as you said before we started recording, for you, that wasn't something that took away from your experience. You still had a positive experience. And that's the thing. It depends on what we're going in for, isn't it? Like your expectations really matters. And you didn't have the expectations to not have interventions. You worked in a hospital. You were familiar that there's protocols and policies. And so, usually if you have that, then you can have a beautiful positive experience if you don't expect to have kind of an undisturbed labor and birth, right?
Mm-hmm. And at the time, I hadn't done enough research to know that you don't have to. Like, I still was under the impression, like, these things have to happen in a childbirth. Like, there's nothing else you can do. You just have to.
Yeah. So in a nutshell, do you want to talk us through a short version of this first birth experience?
Sure. I mean, it was a fairly short delivery for a first baby. I had my first contraction at like 5:30 in the morning, and he was born a little before 4 p.m. Labored at home for a while, got to the hospital around 9:30, and was already 5 centimeters, 90% effaced. I was really blessed. I think that it's important to say that the reason that I had such a good experience and did end up having much less intervention than I would have had is because I had a really, really phenomenal nurse. And she has been a nurse for almost 30 years and has 2 years of experience as a midwife. So she really kind of kept people at bay. The resident at one point had come in and mentioned Pitocin, and I was, again, already 6 centimeters and progressing, and she was like, I don't know why you're even bringing that up at this point, like, because like I said, I got to the hospital around 9:30 and delivered him by 4. So not really there's really no reason for that. So she really kind of kept people out of the room until it was time, until there was like hair, hair starting to show, and she helped me to kind of move around. And I did use some nitrous and was laying down in the bed for a while and realized that wasn't really helping and didn't feel very good. So we, stopped that, and she helped and got me up and moving, and helped me to do things that I wouldn't necessarily have known to do, because at the time I still was very much looking to someone else, being like, I've never done this before. I don't know how to do it. I need, like, you have, almost 30 years of experience. I need you to tell me what I should do next. So she was really helpful. And I think I pushed mostly on my side. It was about an hour and a half. And even though I did not have an epidural, I still don't know that I don't know that I was like working with my body. I don't know that I like recognized what I was feeling enough. So I still was kind of relying. I told him, like, I don't want people yelling at me. Like, I watch that happen a lot because, again, as a NICU nurse, I have to go to the deliveries that we are worried that there's something that's going to happen. So I'm there, and I'm often see like 6 nurses around just kind of yelling and cheering, and maybe that helps some people, but for me, I'm like, I don't want people yelling in my face. So she kind of was like, just focus on me. Nobody else is going to talk. I'll count down from 10 or whatever. But I think I was still just following her lead. But yeah, it went well. I had 2 small 2nd-degree tears that ended up getting stitched up. So I think that was really the only part of the recovery that was like tough afterwards. And like I said, the 3rd stage, I know they gave me Pitocin after I delivered him, and I don't really even remember. If you were to ask, like, oh, how was the placenta delivered? I'm like, I don't know. I think they probably just pushed on my stomach, took it out. I have no idea what happened to it. But yeah, I said it was a good experience purely because I had that nurse kind of like protecting protecting our room, protecting the space. Because at one point I did get to the point where I'm like, I think I should get an epidural. And in my mind, when I remember this story, because it's different, for the person watching versus the person experiencing it, I in my mind was like, I think I might want to get an epidural because I was at like 8 or 9 centimeters. They'd already told me I couldn't have any IV pain meds because it was too close. And so I was like, I either have nothing, like I'm going to go with nothing, or I'm going to get an epidural. And I thought it in my head and said, I'm not going to say it out loud, because if I say it out loud, then like it will be real. It will be a thing. And I was telling the story to someone at one point, and my husband was like, "No, you did say that out loud." And I was like, "Oh, okay, I believe you." But the nurse, I didn't feel like, my husband kept telling me I was doing a good job, but I'm like, "How do you know? You've never done this. I've never done this. Like, what does it mean? Like, what does it mean coming from you?" But then when the nurse who had all this experience was like, "No, you're doing really well. Like, it's fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with getting an epidural at all. But you are progressing pretty quickly, and you're handling it really well. So you have to make the decision that's right for you. But I don't think you need it." And I was like, "Oh, okay." She said, "I don't need it. I don't need it." But anyway, I think that if I had a different care team, if I had a different nurse, and we do have at my hospital a lot of young nurses who definitely haven't seen physiologic birth and haven't been trained in that at all. If I had a different nurse, I think almost 100% chance that I would have gotten an epidural.
Yeah. I'm
Which would have been
so
fine.
like these things though, that these random weird things like this junior doctor just popping in as a woman is literally having a physiological birth, progressing, like you're coming in as a first time mom at 6 centimeters. Like, what is he, one, doing there? And two, ever suggesting Pitocin? But it really goes to show like this like we need to medicalize things, we need to control things, we need to push things along, we need to just without like stepping back and evaluating what's happening in front of his eyes. It shocks me that this is normal. It shocks me that that
Yeah.
would happen. Hmm.
Yeah. And it has
So,
been interesting. This is less about birth, but like now working in the NICU and doing my job, there's things that I'm so bothered seeing now.
oh yeah.
Like the amount of times that we're getting called to things that I'm like, well, this baby shouldn't even be on its way out right now. Like this was an induction that wasn't necessary, and now this is what's happening. And so it's hard. Sometimes it's hard to go in and, as you know, you stepped away from it, but like it's sometimes hard to go in and do my job now because I'm so bothered by the effects that we are creating and then
Yeah.
saving from.
I 100% understand. I never worked as a NICU midwife, but I was in a special care nursery, which is not as you know, like NICU is the ICU for real, for babies. And I had such a hard time working there. I think it's amazing that women like you can. It broke my heart as a student, and I never stepped in there as a registered midwife. I was only there during my studies of becoming a midwife. And I so proudly have a sacred birth worker who's gone through my program who worked in the NICU, who's a pediatric doctor, right? So who stepped away because the same, like she just eventually couldn't make it anymore. She couldn't do it anymore. And of course, it's needed, and it's amazing how it saves babies that couldn't have been saved. But as you also now probably see and know, there's so many babies who shouldn't even be there. They're there because of the treatment of women in labor and the inductions, of course, and also just testing babies for no reason. Well, I think no reason. For example, like this baby could have high blood sugar, so we're gonna prick it and check it so that eventually it goes into NICU. But if you have never checked it and just allowed it to be with mom and breastfeed and like just the whole different way of treating these babies that just instantly goes in for treatment and separation. Anyways, obviously I can go on and on about this. Yeah.
Yeah.
How did you come about actually wanting a home birth after your hospital birth?
It was definitely a journey. So I got pregnant when my son was 8 months old. again, not another not conscious conception. I've never been on birth control at all. I'm 34 and I've never been on birth control. And I think that probably that helps with things. And also, I know God just decided when he was going to bless them, because left to myself, that's not what I would have chosen. And in the course of this pregnancy, continuing to do more research. And it is, like I said, it truly is a journey from where I started, especially me 5-10 years ago, who just everything that I was taught in, nursing school or at work, I'm like, that's what's right. That's what's safe. That's what people should be doing. Anybody who doesn't do it, it's just stupid. My sister-in-law wanted to have a home birth 10 years ago, and I literally told her I forbid it. This is because, again, me as a young infant nurse was like, I just know what's best. So quite a journey. The first time I ever listened to your podcast, I don't think I even made it through the whole episode, because I was like, this is just too much. Like this was 2.5 years ago, whenever I was first started, when I was pregnant with my son. I listened to the episode and I was like, no way, no way. So really have come a long way. Was doing more research, was looking for, I went back to that same podcast I was listening to the first time around. I was trying to look for more natural hospital birth stories. Not surprisingly, there's not a lot of episodes like that. And so I ended up coming back to your podcast and was like, okay, well, I just want to hear about deliveries with no medication. I'm still not interested in home birth. And then slowly but surely, as I was listening to them, learning and realizing oh, that's actually not an emergency. And that actually isn't necessarily what's best. And just finding out that there's so much that we cause and then fix in the hospital system. And there's so much that we don't necessarily cause, but we don't help with the physiology when, again, somebody comes in and they can't move their legs and now they can't use gravity. Now they can't, one of the things I was the most afraid of, because I see it in the hospital, is shoulder dystocia. And learning that reading Ina May Gaskin's book and learning that the majority of shoulder dystocias in a physiologic birth can be resolved purely by repositioning and movement. And it's not this huge scary thing, because those were the things that would have kept me from wanting to deliver at home. I'd be like, what about shoulder dystocia? What if my baby's born and isn't breathing? What if, all these things that you think that you need to be in the hospital for, and then learning there's a really good chance that those aren't going to happen at all if you don't go to the hospital, because not that they never happen, but there's a good chance they won't happen. And so learning more about that. And then I actually have, I have a coworker who decided that after her last birth, she got pregnant a little bit after me, that she wants to have a home birth. And at first, truly, again, this is still, I'm pregnant at this point, a month or two in, and she's telling me, and I'm like, that's great, I support you, but I couldn't. And then I just kept listening to podcasts. And I think my husband realized it before I did, that he, as I was slowly but surely shifting, my mindset was shifting. And at one point he was like, because I was like, I don't know, kind of part of me just wants to have a home birth. And he's like, do you want to have a home birth? And I was like, no, I couldn't do that. And then it just kept over the next couple of weeks. And he's like, we ended up having a conversation. I was like, I want to have a home birth. I do want to have a home birth, it turns out. And so it's definitely a gradual shift. And so I ended up shifting or changing my care over at 32 weeks. So not super far along, but fairly far along to be finding a home birth midwife. And that was when I really committed to it.
Wow, amazing. And this story really makes me happy. The idea that you came in and you listened and you couldn't even listen to a whole birth story and probably got a bit triggered by whatever I was saying in the story. And then actually you came back, and that listening to it also took you from wanting to have a natural hospital birth to actually wanting a home birth. That makes me so happy. I feel like I was a part of that conversion journey into the dark side.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. I'm and I still now, I had my baby and I still am I have some time. I want to just listen to another birth story. I'm why am I still listening to birth stories? I was doing that for prep, but now I'm just enjoying them. But yeah, definitely that you and your podcast were a huge part of that.
That's just That's amazing to me. Absolutely amazing. Makes me very, very happy to hear and gives me hope that they
Yeah.
can convert more people. That
Yeah. If you can convert a NICU nurse, then you can probably convert anybody.
I know, gosh, that's amazing. Yes, because of course I know, like most attitudes, especially NICU, and you who see the worst of the worst, of course it becomes then like this is so dangerous because look at how many babies we have here and all. Like it's of course it's what you see every day, so it's very natural that you would want to avoid that to every cost, and thinking obviously that managing and controlling it would be because that's what we've been told and that's what society says. So, I mean, I think it's amazing and remarkable. And I had a anesthetist, I think, who did a similar journey a few seasons back. And yeah, there's been a few. I mean, I would love to have more of OBs and doctors and nurses. I mean, I do get messages from midwives and nurses in the system who are like, "Oh, I'm listening to your podcast as I'm going into like the labor and delivery," and just to remind myself of actually what it should be, and to try to help it in there as well, which is amazing.
Great. Yeah. That's so important because I think that that's a big part of the problem with L&D. It's just, especially with the younger, we've had a lot of, in the medical world across the hospital, we've had a lot of turnover since the early 2000s, especially after COVID. A lot of older nurses retiring, a lot of new young nurses, and they just don't know. Like they haven't ever seen it, they haven't been taught it, and they just don't know. So the more people who can, hear these stories and like learn how to help a woman who maybe has never thought about giving birth, physiologically, and they come to the hospital and are ready to just do whatever it is that they're told to do. If you're told to do techniques that will help a physiological birth, they'll do them. But that's not what most people know, and it isn't what they're doing for these women to help them. But the more people who can start doing that, the better outcomes we'll probably see.
Yeah. And it is getting worse in the hospital system even now, more so than ever, the conveyor belt and just like that doctor and just this over medicalization. I talk a lot to elder midwives in their 70s, home birth midwives that also has been practicing in hospitals, and they've seen massive shifts from the 80s, the 90s, 2000s to what it is today. And and the inductions, the conveyor belt of inductions and all of this. And yeah, like women come in and they don't know, and they're looking for that elder midwife to help them, just like you felt with your nurse, right? And same here, same all over the world. Younger midwives come out, and they've been trained. Lucky where my training was, but in the actual system, like you get trained to be an obstetric nurse, not so much like a free thinking holistic midwife, autonomous midwife. Most of the places, especially through the universities. So they need these elder midwives, and we need these stories. Yeah. Anyways, off on a tangent we went. Back to your home birth story. So you're 30 plus weeks, you've changed over to home birth midwives. What did you think about the care leading up to your home birth?
I really liked it. I think that I had some ideas in my head from, again, listening to a lot of your podcast episodes, and a lot of those are happening in other countries. I'm in the US, and so things are not necessarily the same. So I would have loved to hear people be like, "Oh, I had to stay home when they came to me." I still had to go, to the office and stuff and bring my son. If I could find one in my area, I'd love to find for my next baby somebody who will come to the house so I don't have to drag two children out to my appointments.
Yeah.
But I loved it. Again, most of any testing I would have had was already done by that point. I think all of it. So when I went, it was just kind of like chatting, them getting to know me. They listened to the baby's heart rate, kind of felt around where she was. My midwife has an assistant and a student. So I'm totally fine with being like, yeah, like all three of you can get in there and feel my belly, do whatever, like just do what you need to do to learn, to be able to help other people. But mostly it was just chatting, talking about my previous birth. So they kind of knew what to expect, and asking me what I wanted for this birth and just trying to get prepared. But yeah, it really wasn't, it was again, mostly just kind of chatting, which is very different. And the appointments were They're like usually at least 45 minutes versus, going to the OB's office can be like 15 minutes, maybe if you're in and out.
Yeah.
So yeah, I enjoyed it. Um, I love my midwife. She's a crazy lady, but she's a lot of fun.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, that is the difference, is that the appointments are longer. And of course, it is different how midwives work. And also, if they're, I know in the US, there's like 21 different types of midwives. So it also depends of what kind of midwife it is, I guess, as well, and how they work. And, on the scale, how nurse-like compared to like traditional midwife, right? It's a scale. And so they, usually the more traditional midwife people will come to your home more so, and the more kind of clinical will have an office and be a bit more towards that way.
Well,
So,
she's been a midwife for I think 28 years. So when I asked her about, like, because I wasn't sure if they were going to come and do like at least a home visit before I delivered, and she was like, I used to do home visits.
right.
And,
Okay.
but like
Right.
the midwife schedule is a really tough one. Midwife
Mm.
Jewel is gonna, again, well, like you're just on call. You don't know how long you'll be gone for helping people. So
Mm.
I think that after you've done it for, almost 30 years, I think it's fair to just be like, I want to just sit in one place and have people come to me for a while.
Sure.
So
Yeah. But I'm surprised she didn't come for one home visit to see kind of the layout of the land and kind of where, what your house is like. That's quite that's usual that to do that. I would say
and it could have been
99%.
good.
Was
Yeah,
that?
like it could have been good also because she would know where the house is for
Yeah.
sure, because my second birth went very quickly.
Ah, yeah.
So it
We'll
would have
get
been
to
nice to
that.
know exactly what house it was.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know actually any home birth midwife who doesn't have a home birth, or sorry, a meeting at the home at least before the birth to know like how do I get there? What's the road like? Are there road closures? What's the fastest way? If it's more rural, like putting out little cones and like where do I just like depending on where you live and everything, right? And like saying helping, oh, are you gonna have a birth pool? Where should you have it? Looking around your house. I mean, that's standard to do as a home birth midwife. So, but maybe she's just like older and go like, oh yeah, done that, don't need it. I don't know.
Perfect.
That's the first I've ever heard of it. But okay, well, let's dive on into your birth story though, shall we? You already told us it's going to be a quick one, so tell us, did it start with a bang?
Yeah, definitely started with a bang. I woke up at just before 4 with the first contraction. It was like a pretty long one, but I'd been half asleep, so I was like, did that happen? So I just waited there and laid in bed for a little bit to see like, is there going to be another one? Started to try to just time them a little bit, see like, because I had prodromal labor for several weeks, though I think sometimes prodromal is I consider it as like non-productive. I don't think there was anything unproductive about that, because I just was contracting like randomly on and off. It wasn't Braxton Hicks. It was more than Braxton Hicks, and it was throughout the day. And mostly at night, I was fine. I would wake up like anytime I'd like wake up and move, I'd like, feel everything tighten, and it was nice because it gave me an opportunity to be like, oh, just practice like not
Mm.
fighting against this, just like you know take breaths through it and just try to relax and let it happen. So it gave me some time to practice that. But anyway, figured when that first contraction hit, let's see if this is kind of the same thing that's been going on or if this is the real deal. And so I just laid there in bed for a little bit. The next one came at like 15 minutes, and then another one came like 14 minutes later. So at that point, like that passed a decent chunk of time. So I figured I'm going to get up. I definitely had like the, clearing out of the system. So that started, at some point I was laying there, I was like, okay, I need to go to the bathroom. So I got up, I left my husband sleeping because again, it was 3, almost 4 in the morning. Everybody's asleep. So I just left him sleeping and figured I'm just going to see how things go. And, yeah, went to the bathroom, body was definitely clearing out, decided to get up and kind of walk around, went to the kitchen, was trying to like put some dishes away and stuff, and just they were starting to come, like it was like 15, 14 minutes, 12 minutes, 10 minutes. And so around 5:20ish, I texted the midwife, probably should have called, texted her. Luckily for me, she was already awake. And just said like, little girl's on the move. And so she called me and said, okay, where are we at? Like, what are you feeling? And I was like, I can still, like, I'm talking to you now, like, as they're happening. So we're okay. But I was like, I'm like, they started off at 15 minutes. We're at this point, like 7 minutes apart. And I thought she had said to me that she was gonna check back with, like, okay, like, she was gonna shower and check back with me in like an hour or two. I can't remember. Maybe I don't remember that correctly. Because then like 20 minutes later, she texted and was like, hey, like, remind me, like, where are we at right now? Like, so she must have showered and decided, like, I don't think so. Because she knew that my first birth was, again, it was less than 11 hours total from start to finish with my first baby. My active labor was, I don't know, probably 6 hours. So knew it would be fast. I just didn't know how fast it would be. So she had been concerned, like, in our meetings, like, are you going to call me? Like, are you actually going to call me? Are you going to call me in time? And I'm like, yeah, like, I don't want a free birth. So of course I'm going to call you. So anyway, I had talked to her at 5:20. She got out of the shower like 20 minutes later, texted me like, where are we at? And in that time, like, after I talked to her, it just, like, it really ramped up. Like, it went from, again, 15, 14, 12, 10, 7, then back to back to back to back. And contractions really started to ramp up. And I'd been like kind of walking around trying to, like, okay, like, lean on the counter, squat, whatever. But I ended up actually laboring almost the entire labor on the toilet, partially because my body was clearing out, and then partially because that's just like what felt good. And I hear women all the time talk about hands and knees, and I, like, thought I would do that with my son. I thought I would do that this time. Like, yeah, I'm going to try my hands and knees. And just, like, never managed to get into that position. So by the time that she had texted back to ask where we were at, it's like, actually things are, like, really ramping up, and I think my water just broke. It had started to trickle. Like, I didn't feel like a pop or anything, but it started to trickle. And like, so I said, like, nothing big, but just like, starting to a little out of time. So with each contraction, it continues. I'm like, definitely my water just broke. There was thin meconium, which is not, the midwife doesn't consider an emergency. I had thin mech with my son as well. But at that point, things had ramped up enough that I saw it and was like, I'm not going to tell her, because I'm pretty sure she wouldn't make me transfer to the hospital unless it was like thick, really thick mech. But I'm not going to tell her until she gets here, because the idea of getting in a vehicle right now and having to go to the hospital is so horrible to me that I can't even imagine. So I'm like, I'll wait till she gets here and I'll tell her. It'll be too late. So at some point, maybe it was around 5, I had told my husband, like, I went in and was just like, I'm in labor. You can just keep laying down. There's nothing you can do. It's going to be a while, because at that point, I thought it was going to be a while. So like, you can just stay in bed. Like, don't worry about it. I'm going to go set up we had the birth pool blown up, and I had moved it the night before to take last pictures with my son and my husband in front of our Christmas tree. So like, we took some pictures as a family of 3. Yes, my Christmas tree was up very late because I wanted to have my baby in front of the Christmas tree. So anyway, I told him, I'm like, oh, I'm just going to go, like, put the birth pool back, and I'll have, like, give me something to do. So I was like setting up the tarp, the birth pool, did all that, blah, blah, blah. And then, he was still just laying down. So around, like I said, I guess 5:45 was when I told the midwife, like, things are really ramping up. Like, I'm pretty sure my water just broke and things have gotten, like, pretty hot and heavy. So she was like, I think it was at 6 o'clock. She was like, I'm leaving, like, right now. I'm on my way. And I called my husband from the bathroom, because I literally, like, I just, like, couldn't like leave. I would, like, get up, and then another I would have a contraction. And at this point, again, I'm so dumb. I'd have a contraction, my water would, leak and whatever. I was, like, on the toilet, and then I'd clean everything up and I put my pants back on. And eventually I was like, why am I still wearing pants? Like, why am I still putting my pants on? So finally, eventually abandoned that. I had, like, a Chuck's pad on the floor in front of the toilet. But I felt like I just, like, couldn't. I'm like, I just have to be here, because first of all, I'm leaking fluid and making a mess. And second of all, like, I just can't even walk 3 steps before having another contraction. And they were so strong. So I called my husband from the bathroom and was like, hey, that's 6 o'clock. Like, can you please fill the birth pool? And he was like, sure. Sure. He comes out to get it set up. And he had practiced everything. He had everything all set up ahead of time, practiced. And at one point, I did not know what it was, but my son had taken a piece that my husband needed, my 18-month-old, I'd taken a piece and had been playing with it, and I like put it on the kitchen table instead of where it had been. Had no idea it was important. So then I see my husband like running around. I'm like, I know I'm sitting there like, I know he practiced this. Like, why is this taking so long? And the poor guy, like, it was the piece that connects to the faucet, and so he thought maybe it was on like the spigot outside, and it's snowing at this point. And he's running around like checking the outside spigots to see if this piece is there, and it was on the kitchen table the whole time. And so I couldn't be mad at him at all for taking a long time because it was my fault. But he did find it eventually. And again, by God's grace, we happen to have a washer dryer hookup in our, mud room that doesn't have a washer dryer hooked up to it. So he had the hoses on that because no other faucet in our house would possibly have filled up the tub in time. There was zero chance. So like I said, at 6, I called him. He started filling up the tub. And I was still in the bathroom, feeling at that point a little sorry for it, just a smidge sorry for myself, pitying myself, because I was like, man, this is more intense than I remember it being with my son, and I just have so much more to go. And I was sitting there thinking, I want an epidural. I want to go get an epidural, but I just couldn't possibly get into a car right now, but I really wish that I could have one. And who knew that at that point I was definitely in transition. And I should have known enough. I listened to these stories enough to know, but it was too soon. I was in complete and utter denial still that I was as close as I was. And I guess kind of around the same time, my husband was listening to the changes in my sound. I initially was like just trying to be very quiet. And then I was like, why don't I just use some sound here, some of those low, sort of tones. And he was listening, and he also, I guess, had the same thought of being like, man, I feel bad that she's so uncomfortable, like so soon, like there's going to be so much more time to go. And like both of us are just in this place of being like, we have so much further to go. And it's really, it's really intense. And I don't remember it being like this. And that's a bummer. This is going to be a hard next couple hours. So he was getting the birth pool, and my midwife got there. I don't remember exactly what time. 6. She lives like 25 minutes away. She ran a couple red lights to get there, and she walked in. She heard me, came in, like popped her head in the bathroom, and was like, "Hey, like how we doing?" I'm like, "We're good, we're good." And she's like, "Sweetie, my assistants they're not going to get here in time." And again, still in denial. I was like, "They might." I literally said to her, "I'm like, they might." And she's like, "Okay," So finally, I was just to the point where I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I'm just." This is so intense. I'm so uncomfortable. I really just want to try getting in the pool. And so I was calling my husband. I'm like, is the pool full enough? And he's like, I think so. I don't know. I was like, why don't you ask the midwife? Like, she probably knows if there's enough water in there. And she looked and it was like plenty full. And she's like, yeah, it's fine. So like immediately I'm like, I don't close off. Like, I was like, I'm getting in. And I think that she heard that, and she was still like trying to set her stuff up because she hadn't been there for more than a couple minutes. So she was still trying to like get her stuff up. And I think she heard me be like, I'm getting in the pool, and was like, oh gosh, like kind of trying to get her stuff ready. So I like walked over, got in the pool, and had just one instant of sheer and utter bliss where I felt absolutely nothing, like not a contraction, not pain, not anything. And it was a moment, just a moment. And pretty much as soon as that happened, I just felt like a full lower body spasm from like the bottom of my abdomen and hips, just like everything spasmed. And that was when it clicked in my head. I was like, oh my gosh, like this baby is coming right now. And I said to the midwife, I was like, I was wrong. Like, your assistants aren't going to get here in time. I was wrong. Like, she's coming right now. And she's like, okay, like, that's fine. She was just kind of like, yeah, like, it's fine, relax. And I will say I was overwhelmed in that moment. Because again, I knew it would be fast. I just didn't expect it to be this fast. So I think that I think it did scare me a little bit of it just happening. Again, there's nothing I could do about it. It was just happening whether I wanted it to or not, so quickly. And I wasn't really prepared. Didn't have that slow oxytocin build at all. And so I was like saying like, I need this to slow down. I need this to slow down. And I felt like there was like nothing I could do. Like, I think briefly I thought about like, oh, okay, smaller, slower breaths will help with that. But it didn't matter. And then had another one of those full lower body spasms. And I did decide to feel and see, because like I still in my head was like, we're not that close. it hasn't been long enough. We're not that close. And I'm like, can I even feel her head? So I did. I felt in and I felt her head, but she was still in like several inches. And so I said to the midwife, I'm like, I can feel her head, but she's not that close. Um, and then I did have like just a little bit of a pause and just kind of, I was like leaning on the edge of the pool and was just saying out loud, like, thank you, God, for this break. Like, thank you, God, for this break. Cause I just felt like I needed that break so badly. And I still was conscientious enough to be thinking, oh my gosh, this baby is going to tear me from front to back. Like, she's coming out so quickly. There was no time for things to stretch. Like, I just needed to slow down. But anyway, got a short break. And then again, had another one of those full spasms from the hips down. And she was then out to like her eyebrows. So she went from like several inches in to like out to her eyebrows. And I felt down and I was like, I told my husband, like, you can feel her head. And he was thinking, like with my son, I pushed for an hour and a half. So he saw him crown. So in his mind, he was like, oh, there's going to be like just a little bit of head and hair. And he reached down, he's like, oh my gosh, there's a head. And I was like, yeah, no, she's coming. So I did get into, I think I was just like leaning against, I can't quite remember, but I think I was just leaning against the edge of the birth pool, and the midwife helped my husband, come around to where he'd be able to catch her. And I think it was the, next spasm, her head was out. And then I do vaguely remember my husband saying, like, what do we do now? And the midwife being like, we just wait, we just wait. And I've heard people talk about being able to feel the baby move. And I don't know that I could have described it as being like, oh, I felt her twist or whatever. But I did have that experience that some women on this show have had, where I was like, stop touching me. Don't touch me. And they're like, no one's touching you. Like, that is your baby moving. Oh, okay, never mind. And yeah, one more spasm, and she came flying out. And my husband, was trying to figure it out. The midwife helped him pass her to me, got her on my chest, and yeah, she was here.
I've never heard anyone describe it as spasms before.
That's what it felt like. Like, it didn't feel like me pushing. It didn't feel like, and I did feel the ring of fire a little bit, but again, it was just like, it was so, she came out so quickly that I didn't have to feel it for long, but truly it just felt like every muscle spasming and just shoving her out.
Yeah, so it sounds like it was 4 kind of bearing down spasms or contractions, whatever you want to say. It sounds like you had 4, like 1 when you got into the pool after you had that nice moment of seemingly a break that probably didn't last that long. And then
No.
like head, feeling head out, body out.
Yeah, I think that was it. Maybe I'm
Right.
remembering it wrong. But it was just
Yeah.
so, yeah, it was so fast. It was so surprising. So I could be remembering it wrong for sure, but that's all that I remember. I just remember a handful of that feeling, the spasms, and her just. So the midwife has said that she was at my house for 7 minutes.
Yeah. Amazing. And in that moment, you like walked from the toilet, you got in the pool. So that to me sounds like a true fetal ejection reflex, where the body's just like, as you say, spitting the baby out, spasming the baby out. So, I mean, truly, all my years, I've never heard anyone use that verbiage. So, I mean, that's a new. I love hearing new ways of describing birth. That's why I'm here. So, thanks for that. And yeah, that's like fetal ejection reflex is truly like you don't spend time like having those bearing down sensations like you had the first time. You had like 1.5 hours of that, which is normal. This is like your body's expelling your baby, going from 0 to 100. Bam, that's the baby. That's the fetal ejection reflex. Amazing. So what was that, like 2.5 hours?
Yeah, so 4 o'clock was the first contraction, and she was born. We don't know, it's a home birth, so no one knows the exact time, but like 6:30 essentially. So yeah, 2.5 hours. And I don't think, again, that first hour, things were still like so minimal. So I'd say like the active stuff was probably from, I don't know, maybe less than 45 minutes, half an hour.
Very precipitous birth. Yeah. So, I mean, when your first birth, as you said, like the active kind of, what would be counted probably would be from going into the hospital there and you were 6 centimeters, but that you have maybe 5-6 hours of active. labor until you had your baby. And usually the second will be quicker. Sometimes we say half. But when you have them that close, so having your baby already, like conceiving at 8 months, it's like your channel is already open, right? And usually those babies can be very quick, which, you are a case of showing. So I understand your midwife going like, are you going to call me? Are you going to tell me what's happening?
Well, and that was partially because, again, I just like listening to home birth stories and saying, I'm like, I want to be able to just kind of do my thing and not be bothered. And I don't really want like a lot of I just want to just do my thing. And so I was kind of asking at one of the appointments about, when to call. And I think she was interpreting it as me being worried about calling her too soon and bothering her. And she's like, no, like, you're not gonna bother me. And her assistants were like, no, you're not here. Like, you're misunderstanding. She doesn't want you coming early and bothering her. And so I think that's why she like, even after I left, I was like, do you think she's going to call? I'm like, I definitely want you there. I just don't want you there for a long time. Cause like they normally would do at least a Doppler every, I think like maybe 15 or 30 minutes. And then when you're pushing, it's every couple contractions. And even that, I'm like, I don't really want you to do that. Seems annoying. So the way that I did it, we had no Dopplers, no checks, nothing, because there wasn't any time for it.
Yeah, obviously. So you're in the pool, you're having your baby, then what?
So she put her on my chest, and I will say again, a lot of this is from listening to your podcast. The baby came out, she was eyes open, alert, but she was adjusting to life, I guess, a little bit slower. And the midwife was wanting, I think, more, more stimulation than I really wanted to give. And so I just kept being like, she's okay, she's fine. She's like, I talked to her, rubber, like whatever. So we ultimately ended up doing the bulb syringe, and I gave her like, I blew in her face and gave her a couple puffs of air. The midwife gave her first APGAR score of 5, which I think it was higher than that. I thought she was fine. She's fine. I thought she had good tone. I'm like, I'm feeling her cord. She's got a good heart rate. Again, I'm a NICU nurse. Like this is what this is what I do. And maybe it's my own baby, so I'm not seeing what I should be. But I'm like, I'm feeling her cord. Her heart rate is well above 100. I think her tone looks okay. She's purple, like she's not gray. She's purple. She's just give her, and she's pinking up, she's fine. But yeah, so there was a little bit more intervention there than I would have liked. Would have just liked her to be able to kind of like take her time. Because honestly, I told you, I was overwhelmed by what had just happened to me. And she had to also have been overwhelmed by what just happened to her. Like she was just in this lovely cozy womb, and now it's just like, what the heck just happened to me? So I felt like she needed a little bit more time. And initially there wasn't any like blood or anything in the water. And then after the course of, we focused on the baby first, and then I had some bleeding. So then the midwife really wanted to get the placenta out, which I wanted to give it more time, but she was concerned about the bleeding. I think as we talked about a little bit before, I knew that the midwife I chose was more inclined to manage care early for that, because I had asked about it. And I think I just went in on a wing and a prayer and was like, oh, hopefully I'm just one of those people who delivers their placenta very quickly afterwards, and I don't even have to worry about it, and we won't ever get to that point. So I probably should have done more to talk that over with her and say, like, I'd really like there to be more time. And maybe she still wouldn't have wanted to wait because there was, blood, and it's hard to tell how much when you're in the pool. But anyway, so she really wanted to work on the placenta, and then she asked me about, like, the cord had stopped pulsing and was white, and she asked about cutting it, and I was like, I don't really, like, do we have to? And then she's like, well, it's not pulsing. I'm like, well, I guess it's, at this point I can't actually remember I don't remember if we cut it before working on the placenta or not. I can't remember. I think we did. No, it was still attached, because I thought it was short, but as the placenta got like, closer to coming out, then obviously there was more length to the cord, but it wasn't, it was fine. But anyway, she ended up wanting me to put tension on it and trying to cough. And I now understand what people are saying. I didn't quite get it before, about, like, I didn't even know like how to push for it, because again, my body had just done that on its own. So I'm like, I didn't participate in getting the baby out. So trying to like get the placenta out, I'm like, I don't even know exactly how to focus my energy or muscles. But I tried that, and she ended up pulling quite a bit and did get it out, and I didn't love that. And then there was quite a bit more bleeding, so they decided she wanted me to get out of the pool. So we did, and I shuffled off over to my bed, with a Chuck's pad, just catching the blood. And then the baby was fine the whole time. She was just snuggled in there. So they got me cozy in bed, but I was still bleeding. So she started with some herbs, some sort of herbs. And I was glad because I was hoping that would be enough. But then I guess continued to bleed. And I don't actually know the time frame of this. I don't know how long I was continuing to bleed for. I could feel when I could feel the blood continuing to kind of like every few minutes kind of like do a little gush. But I don't know how much blood it was, and I don't know how long it went on for. I know that by the time they did all the interventions, it had definitely been over an hour. Was still continuing to have those kind of gushes. So started off with some herbs. Then they asked about the Pitocin injection, and at that point, I'm like, my baby is out of me, so sure. So gave me Pitocin. Some amount of time went by. Still wasn't happy with the bleeding. Gave me some sublingual Cytotec. And then I think ended up giving another injection of Pitocin at some point before they left. So quite a bit of management of that. And I felt fine the whole time. So I don't know if I needed it or not. I'm really not sure.
Yeah, it would have been interesting to know actually how much you lost to have a kind of idea. Of course, it really also just the amount doesn't matter alone, of course, as you know, it's like, are you symptomatic? Or do you have other, signs that this is actually affecting you? And as we know, some can be affected by very little, less than what one would say is a hemorrhage, and some can handle a lot of blood loss. And we can handle a lot. I mean, we can handle a liter because we have this extra blood volume on board, which, we then pee out after birth, through urine and then obviously breastfeeding. But yeah, it's curious. I mean, it does sound like she maybe was a bit more towards, as you said, managing and a bit more clinical and medical in that sense, and maybe a bit more afraid of, and also it sounds like she didn't have her assistants, and she's an elder midwife. It sounds like she's been doing this for a while. And so maybe it was also like wanting to manage. And it is that I think also you didn't mention now, but you mentioned to me that there was some remaining membranes still in.
Yeah, so that was she was born on Wednesday, and it was Sunday that I ended up calling the midwife back. Because there was I'm like, I don't know what is coming out of me. It's an alien or something coming out of me. And it was that a clot had essentially I maybe gotten like in a piece of the retained membrane. And so it was like essentially the clot was coming out and pulling the membrane with it. So she had to come in, and I was kind of so when I was bleeding, I knew that I'm not going to the hospital. I did this lovely home birth. So I feel fine. Unless I feel fine, if I don't feel fine, then maybe I would. But I'm like, for right now, I'm staying home with my baby. And then when she came Sunday to look at whatever, I'm like, what on earth is this? And at first she wasn't sure until she realized, like, okay, this is like a piece of membrane that just has like a clot, like literally like sitting in it, kind of pushing it out. And so she ended up kind of reaching up in there as far as she could go up to the cervix and kind of pulling out what she could. And I did get a little upset when I was concerned at that point that I would potentially have to go in and get like any sort of sweep, because I'm like, I felt like I worked really hard to have this really nice home birth, and I felt great after I delivered her. Like I felt amazing.
Yeah.
Like it felt like nothing had even happened. And so I was like, if I go and have to get that sweep, I don't think I will feel great afterwards. And I just felt really sad about the idea of being like, after all this other stuff, after delivering a baby, to have to go in and do this and have this be the reason that I now have to like, be uncomfortable and recover slowly and whatever. Like I just didn't like that. So we just decided, she did that sweep, she got out. It's, we're hoping that's all of it. And I just told her, like, I know what the signs and symptoms of infection are. So I'm going to just monitor that.
Yeah.
If that happens, then I'll go in. And if not, I'm going to hope that either it's all out or that my body will get rid of the rest on
Yeah.
its own.
Well, it sounds like your
But yeah, so that was
body, yeah, it sounds like your body knew what it was doing and removed it itself. But that also then makes sense why potentially you kept on bleeding after birth and they kept on, because you told me they were massaging your uterus, your fundus, top of the womb, top of the belly, and it kept on going soft. Because the biggest reason that we bleed postpartum is that our uterus lacks tone. Right, that it gets floppy. And that's why the massage is something that midwives do. Shouldn't do it on routine, shouldn't be a thing that you do every, I don't think, and it doesn't usually happen at home, just on routine, but you do it if you feel like that it is floppy and it's not contracting down like it should. It should feel like actually like this tennis ball, like very strong tennis ball inside your belly. That's what it should feel like even after birth, because it should contract down. It should be, it's just very strong, very, very strong muscle. Um, and so you kept on saying that they kept on doing that and you kept on kind of continuing to bleed. Well, then it's number two. The biggest reason is tone. The second biggest or most common reason why you bleed is because you have remaining tissue. And what you told me is that she rushed that placenta to come out and she did it in the pool, which is not very controlled. You can't really see well. And it's a bigger chance that something is left behind, that you pull too hard and you don't get the whole thing out. If you would ever do managed, better to have you on the bed that you can control what she's doing, right? Because then she can see, because she's doing management, right? And so I think that remaining piece could most likely actually be because of that management in the pool and that was remaining inside. And that's also maybe why you bled afterwards, because it's still remaining. And then, your body's clever. It seals it somehow. You close the cervix and then eventually a few days later it was ready to pop it out. And it did so with the clot that probably formed because it was still inside. Even though your cervix had closed, you still were kind of bleeding inside because of that membrane, until your body's so clever and does its thing. And, by somewhere close to a week, 10 days, your womb will contract down to below your pubic bone, right? It's amazing, and down to its normal size, but it can't if there's still stuff remaining inside. So that's why your clever body expelled it. For some women, it's still in there, and they keep on bleeding for weeks, sometimes longer, and go in and have to do a D&C and so on. I have a beautiful now graduate from the Sacred Birthworker Mentorship. She had some remaining tissue, and she had it for, she kept having a bit of symptoms around that. I could see it on an ultrasound. And for 1 week, she herself did high doses of C vitamin, doing yoni steaming with good herbs. And I don't know if she did anything else. She probably did. But like taking, raspberry leaf tea, strong herbs to like help tone the muscle of the uterus and help the uterus nourish itself to like expel what was in there. And when she got back to do another ultrasound, it had shrunk to almost nothing, whatever was in there. So her body too expelled it with some help, and your body expelled it on its own. It was ready to do that. But I think it's really good to know that you can also be very proactive with how you encourage your body to heal as well. And when it comes to so you got a lot of medication. How did you feel on that medication? Because a lot of women can feel nauseous or like that their uterus really clamps down. And that's probably why it clamped down so hard. I mean, Cytotec is a very strong medication. You got 2 doses of Pitocin as well and herbs. I mean, that's a lot. So even your body probably would have continued to bleed with that remaining tissue had she not given you that.
Yeah, it's hard to know. It's hard to know how I felt. I know that with each progressive child, your afterbirth pains are stronger. So I will say, the fundal massages were probably the most unpleasant part of the entire delivery experience. It was very hard, very uncomfortable. And I was like, please just stop, leave me alone. But I did have really strong afterbirth pains for several days, pretty much until that came out, because I think it was my body trying to get rid of that piece of retained membrane. But I knew that it gets stronger with each child, and obviously my children are close together. So I just kept kind of, attributing it to that. And honestly, that was pretty miserable for a couple of days. That was pretty miserable because especially when especially when I would breastfeed, like I would just get these, it felt almost worse than, honestly, it felt almost worse than like the labor contractions. But I just kept saying like, oh, I know that they get stronger, with each kid. So that's probably all that this is. But once that piece of membrane came out, I realized that it was like, oh no, that wasn't just your like standard, like, oh, second baby pains. That was just my body trying to get rid of it. So it's hard to know, like, how did the medication make me feel when that was happening? Like I was having those afterbirth pains kind of right away from the beginning. That maybe was because they gave me those meds that kind of crank things down so quickly, but also because my body was trying to do that on its own in order to get rid of what it needed to get rid of.
Yeah. 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 I think, a message from this story, I think, is to, maybe don't do any managed pulling on placentas in birth pools. I think that's a good lesson from this one. And, and really, when you manage, it really should be a good reason. And of course, you said that, there was a little bit of bleeding in the pool. It's really hard to estimate. But when we meddle, as we talked about before, but it happens in the hospital, the risk is that we cause more. We are so beautifully designed. We really are, as women, and babies and birth is beautifully designed. And the physiological birth of the placenta is the most optimal for mums and babies too. To do it in its own time. For some, it just plops on out, like literally after birth. And for some, it can take an hour or two, like it can take time. And both is fine. And that is one thing that I think anyone who's having a home birth needs to ask their midwife, is their management of the third stage of placental birth, to figure out if they are in alignment with how you want to birth your placenta. If you want to have a natural birth, holistically full on, also the birth of the placenta, you need to ask your midwife this, because a lot of home birth midwives are really scared of bleeding. And so even though they can be very hands-off at the birth of the baby, can just switch up. And I've witnessed this when I've been with home birth midwives that I haven't birthed with before, and I've been in the, where we both have the same client, and they literally straight after the birth of the baby are going like, okay, let's get out of the pool, let's birth the placenta, you can birth the placenta now, pull on the cord. And I'm like, hey, what's happening? Like 5 minutes in, 1 minute in, like, and you wouldn't have guessed that from how she is or how she was at the birth. But there's a switch up. And I think it comes from maybe, witnessing something at some point and becoming scared, and then just having that knee-jerk reaction. But unfortunately, what it can cause, having that fear, is obviously overmanagement and causing that which you are fearing. Because we're so delicate in that postpartum time, that hour after birth, before you birth your placenta, that is the most dangerous time for the mum. And it's a time we need to be super chill and just in the love bubble and let that mum have her bonding time. And that's most likely going to prevent bleeding. So it's like you're working against yourself if you're scared, because then you act before maybe you should. Yeah. I just wish that we had more trust generally on all levels, in all institutions, whether it's home, birth center, or in hospital, for the natural design of birth. And not be so scared of it.
Yeah, because I don't think I'd even had like any contractions after having the baby, like before we tried to work on the placenta. Like I don't think my body was trying to get it out yet. So
yeah, I get you.
So if you had somebody who was like in my case where there was bleeding before the placenta was delivered, like is that something that you still just wait on? Like that's not a problem. When does that become a problem?
Yeah. The thing is, when the placenta also separates, there is usually a little gush of blood, the separation bleed. And a lot of times in hospital, everywhere, if a midwife or someone who's caring for you is afraid of bleeding, they can sometimes jump at that separation bleed and go, that was a gush. we need to, manage.
Mhm.
So that's important to know that that's normal, that when the placenta is separating that happens. And the thing is, I don't, it's very different. Of course, if someone's hosing blood, which is very obvious if that happens, which is very rare. And most of the time when that happens, it's because of an induction and vacuum or forceps or some sort of meddling, actually. That is much higher likelihood of having major hemorrhages in hospitals, not at home. Very rare at home. Um, Usually it's like, yeah, the tone maybe is weak, and then you do a bit of massaging, you see what comes out. Um, it's very much I look at the woman, it's holistically, it's like some women and you seem to be one of them, like are not that affected by blood loss, and we're designed to lose blood. And so it's more, is she feeling faint? Is she going, pale? Is she symptomatic? Is she having a raised heart rate? Is she having strong symptoms of I'm having blood loss? Or is she not? So one of my clients lost, 800 mils, another one lost around a liter, and they were both walking around, breastfeeding their babies, going to the toilet, peeing, chatting, like no symptoms of blood loss whatsoever. And I've had women who've had like 200 mils, like barely nothing, and feeling faint and having to like sit down on the bed and like having to be held as she walked to the, bathroom, and really, so it's like, that's the thing. It's like, it's not just the blood loss. It's, are you affected by it as well? That really matters. And of course, we don't want to have a huge blood loss because that can affect your breastfeeding journey, right? And it affects your recovery. So even if you're not symptomatic, if you're coming up over a liter, yeah, like that would probably be a good idea to act on that anyways, right? Even though you're not feeling it. But it's really up to the woman too, and asking the woman. I know you said before, maybe you didn't say that here while we're recording, but that you said to her, I'm not feeling symptomatic. I'm fine. I feel fine. And I think that is important too, to take in consideration what is the woman saying as well. So yeah. That would be my answer to that. Just what I know and what I've noticed and why I think this is important to talk about. I'm not against taking medication. I really want to say that. I know this is the Natural Birth podcast and it could be taken as that. I'm just an advocate for looking at women holistically, which I feel is missing in the discourse. It's missing generally. It's just like, you bleed, you take this. And it's like, no, it's very much, who are you? What are you anemic? Like, what was your iron stores? That's something you should know as a midwife. Like, what was the iron stores for that woman? What's her hemoglobin going into birth? What can she handle? That also depends, right? To potentially act quicker with someone who has a really low iron store, low hemoglobin. She's coming in anemic. She's symptomatic. Like, you maybe act and give her, synthetic oxytocin, Pitocin, you call it, before she even would be classified for a hemorrhage, and the amount of blood loss. It's all about looking at the woman. So you might give what you got to someone who's bleeding much less if they're really symptomatic, of course, right? So it's more that. It's more, and and I'm just aware that this seems to be a thing. It's a huge thing in hospital to want to do this, to want to be actively managing. And if you've had a medicalized birth, it makes sense. If you've had medication in labor and birth, it would make sense to have a managed third stage, because you do have a more likelihood of bleeding if you've had medications on board. If you've been given Pitocin, all of this in labor, that increases your risk actually. So it makes sense to give it postpartum as well when when having the placenta. If you had a physiological birth, the risk of having a bigger hemorrhage increases with giving Pitocin, which is contraindicated. Like, you don't think so. You go like, well, that must make sense. And they don't, but actually that's what studies show, is that you don't reduce the huge hemorrhages that you're trying to reduce with giving Pitocin if a woman had a totally natural birth, unmedicated, unmeddled with. It's important to have the unmeddled with too, because you can be meddled with a lot that causes you to bleed, especially after the birth. That's when you need to, as a midwife, step back and like calmness. And I mean, I understand her. She came in 7 minutes later, you had a baby. She was probably a bit stressed. And then you do go into more manage mode generally when you're kind of in that mode as well. So, I mean, that's quite normal that someone does that. Doesn't mean that it's good, but you come in with kind of high adrenaline, baby born, okay, and then a bit of blood loss, okay, let's do this, and you're just trying to manage what's going on. And I've heard that story a few times that women had experience if they birth quite quickly and so on. And then one of the risks for bleeding, like a higher chance, is having a quick birth, because that can cause your uterus to then go, whew, shock. I'm taking a break, I'm not contracting. And so, then you have the tone. If you have not got good tone, the uterus bleeds. So, it's hard, of course, as me just hearing your story, to know right or wrong from anything. It's just a discussion I think it's important to have, because I'm noticing more and more women having their third stage interfered with, and it doesn't sound on all the stories that it should have been. And that's why I think it's an important thing to just bring to the surface, because I'm noticing a pattern, and I'm seeing it also out there in hospitals and in birth centers and home births. So yeah, I think it's important to talk about.
Yeah, and probably planning for that and pushing back ahead of time would have been the right choice for me. Like I said, I asked my midwife about it. I was like, well, I have an hour, and she was like, essentially said by 15 minutes, we want to start seeing something. So I knew that was a possibility, but again, just kind of went into it hoping that like mine will just come out by 15 minutes and I won't have to deal with that. Because in the moment I wanted more time, but I also just again had a precipitous delivery. So at that point, you're not really in a place where you're like fighting for what you want. And again, should have been more educated if you're saying with her saying oh, it's bleeding, so now it needs we need to get it out. And it's like, all right, I guess that is true, so all right, we'll do what we need to do. So I think just kind of trying to be more assertive ahead of time would have been the right choice, of saying I want to be given at least this amount of time, unless there's truly something emergent, like I'm symptomatically, or it's just I'm bleeding out.
Yeah. And then again, that bleeding out is it's extremely rare. I've had no woman ever at home needing to transfer because of that, that happening. It's so rare. I've only seen major hemorrhages in medicalized births in hospital. Only there. So, if you had a first-time mama in front of you right now who's about to have her first baby, and she really wants to have a natural and empowering birth experience, what advice and pearls of wisdoms would you give to her?
I would say just, a lot of other people say, just learn as much as you can and learn about all the different types of delivery, so that that you're mentally prepared for whatever happens, that what could lead to potentially needing interventions, to go in knowing what you want and doing everything that you can ahead of time to prepare for that, whether it's physically, mentally, whatever you need to do, but then also give yourself a lot of grace, because some people's bodies just spit babies out, and other people's, take days and days, and maybe you need help. So that you're prepared ahead of time, that nothing that happens is a failure, because no way that you deliver should you ever feel like you've failed. So learn about everything, so that if that happens, and that does end up being how it ends for you, that you can still feel positive about yourself and your birth experience. And then if you are deciding to have a home birth, I guess really any type of birth, but just do whatever you need to do to protect your headspace going into it. Because if I learned anything from this delivery, I exercised a lot before I had my son, because I didn't have any other children, so I had time to do it. And I hardly exercised at all this time around, because I have, pregnant from when my baby was 8 months to 17 months. So it's so much about your mind. It's, I think, a lot less about your physical fitness than it is about your mental preparedness. So do whatever you have to do to protect your mind. And if that means not telling people, we didn't tell people. There was a couple people who knew we were having home birth, but I know how judgmental I was. I know how verbally out loud, very clearly judgmental I was of people having home birth before. And that is how a lot of people are, that you say what you're going to do and they feel like they should just chime in. I don't know why they feel that way, but they just do. So if you need to just not tell people, then don't tell people. Don't put yourself in a position where you're going to be questioning and second guessing the decision that you've made. If you've done the research and you feel confident about it and you have a good care team and that's what you want to do, then just stop it right there. Keep that in your mind. Don't let other people chime in with their opinions. So don't share that if that's what that means. And as it gets closer, if you need to kind of isolate yourself beforehand and not really be interacting with people as much, not be texting, because it does get stressful towards the end when people are like, oh, like, what are you due? Aren't you due? Like, you didn't have your baby yet? People texting, baby yet? I'm like, you would know. If I had a baby yet, you would know. So yeah, if you need to just kind of step back so that you can just continue that confidence, because that, again, I think the mental part of it is much more significant than the physical part of it. So protect your mind.
Good advice. Love it. Thank you, Casey, NICU nurse, for your birth stories.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me, and thank you for having this podcast, because you are converting people.
Thank you for listening. If you love this podcast, then please consider sharing it, leave a review, or make a contribution on our Patreon page. And if you want to connect on social media, then find the podcast on Instagram as The Natural Birth Podcast. Thank you for listening.